caregivers need meaningful support. What does that look like? And what tools and resources are available for family caregivers? We'll explore all of that and more, so stay tuned and we'll get into it. Hi, Dr. Lakeland here. Welcome to Caregiver Chats. I'm a gerontologist and caregiving advocate for Home Instead, an Honor company. I'm so glad you're taking the time to join me. These conversations are a space for learning, reflection, and support. And I invite you to subscribe to Caregiver Chats on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget, I love hearing from you. You can email me anytime at caregiverchats@homeinsteadinc.com. Caregivers often find themselves overwhelmed, not knowing where to turn for support. Today's guest understands that deeply. Ashley Stevens is a gerontologist, licensed clinical social worker, and dementia educator who has spent the past 16 years supporting caregivers and families as they navigate aging, dementia, and complex family dynamics. Through her Instagram presence, she's also sparking conversations that many families are afraid to have out loud. I'm really looking forward to our discussion. Hi, Ashley. Welcome. I am so excited to chat with you today.
Hi, thank you for having me. So excited to be here.
Oh, the pleasure is all mine. And I would love for our listeners to get to know you a little bit. I know you have a personal experience with Alzheimer's, and that maybe was some of the inspiration for the work that you do today. So would you mind sharing a little bit about that and what you're doing now to support caregivers and just, you do such great, meaningful work. I just want everyone to know all about it.
Thank you. Yes. And honestly, I really believe that the work chose me before I chose it. I was introduced to Alzheimer's disease at a very young age when my great-grandma Choli was first diagnosed. And I watched what it did to my family. Basically, the challenges that my great-grandma experienced, the abruptness in our family, my mother and my grandmother stepping up to become her primary caregivers, and just really that shift that took place in our family. And I witnessed that at age 6. And so, of course, I had no clue what any of that meant. But I did know that Grandma Choli was changing in front of me, and I didn't understand what was happening. And I really believe that that stayed with me over the years. It stayed in my heart, what I witnessed, the visuals, I still have them with me today, and also the strength and the courage that it took my mother and my grandmother, who became her primary caregivers. Witnessing that at a young age really helped me to become the woman I am today. I always say my family is just built with caregivers, and I believe I'm a caregiver at heart as well. And so I became a social worker and saw that in other families. Other families are also struggling like my family. They're trying to navigate a very difficult diagnosis and disease process, and they're typically doing it alone with limited supports and services and funding, and really given that diagnosis and sent home packing, just like my family was. And so I do this work to honor my family's legacy, but to also support those families that look like my family and those families that are experiencing some of those challenges and opportunities. And so the work I do today as a gerontological social worker really helps families understand the disease, develop coping skills, and create goals around how they can support their loved one, but also support themselves and get that support that they need or that they wish they had, kind of processing some of that with them.
Gosh, what a way to truly carry your family's legacy on and to make such a meaningful difference. And as you were describing your experience, my great-grandma also had dementia, but there was really no diagnosis back then. So I also have some of those vivid memories of grandma not remembering my name or my mom's name, and my grandma also stepping in. So we have some similarities in our family stories and how dementia has impacted. And I think what is so interesting is today, compared to maybe when our great grandmas had dementia, there's so much more, diagnostic tools. There are more resources, still not enough, but it looks somewhat different. But we do know that I think the challenge caregivers face of making sure they have the support and resources, it's still there, but looks maybe a little bit different today than it did. But I know that you have this fantastic online social media presence, the Dementia Guru, and a lot of the work you do is around supporting caregivers. And you have, as we were preparing for this discussion, you said something that kind of I think maybe stop some people in their tracks. Self-care is not enough. Because I know we talk about caregivers, okay, make sure you're taking care of yourself so that you can continue to care for
Yes.
others. But, that self-care, we kind of throw that word around. I think it's almost lost its meaning. So tell us a little bit more about that. What do you mean by self-care is not enough?
Yes, and I love that this came up just organically in our conversation
Yeah.
because I really do believe that self-care without that structural support and without clear boundaries is just a band-aid. It's
Yeah.
really just a band-aid fix. And many times self-care advice can feel insulting to caregivers. Like, what do you mean? I don't have time for self-care because I'm doing the caregiving stuff, the hard stuff. I don't
Yeah.
have time to take care of myself. Of course, I put myself on the back burner because when you're drowning, a bubble bath is not going to heal your pain, right?
Mm.
That's not enough. So, the work that I do really examines how caregiver stress is not just about needing to relax or just taking a bubble bath, but it's really about the invisible labor, that emotional labor and chronic responsibility that caregivers are enduring in that role, and how after years of doing that, they've come up against decision fatigue. They are tired, they are
Mm.
exhausted. And if you don't put in some structural supports for you to take care of yourself or take a break, have some respite, or even set those boundaries in place, that is detrimental to you as a caregiver. So it's not just those feel good things that we do for ourselves, those trendy feel good things. It's not just that. It's also, I hate to sound so strongly about this, but it's life or death. Caregivers really
Mm.
do have to think intentionally about how can I care for myself? What are the boundaries that I put in place to protect myself and my loved ones so that I can continue on in this role?
Mm.
It's also being able to sustain this role that you have taken on.
Gosh, that's so true because often in caregiving, we don't know how long it's going to last. And so,
Mhm.
as you reference, some people are in this role for years and years before they even look for support for themselves because they think, okay, I'm just going to get through the next day, the next week, the next month. And then they stop and they're like, wow, several years have gone by and I've stopped taking care of
Mm.
myself. And to your point, it can be life or death. We, unfortunately, in our roles, hear of caregivers who, end up hospitalized or even worst case scenario, passing away before the person they're caring for because they're not meeting their needs. So you're so right. It can truly be life or death, which might kind of sound shocking and jarring, but I think maybe it's what some caregivers need to hear to maybe seek out some of the supports. And Ashley, you mentioned the structural supports. Can you talk to us more about that? What kind of things are you referencing when you say structural supports for caregivers?
Yes. And I work with caregivers day in and day out. And one of the first things we're talking about is what does your support network look like? And have
Mm.
you built that yet? That's structural to me, right? Determining who your people are, who that network of support, who those people are and what that looks like. Is that going to be informal supports, people who are already naturally, organically in your circle So that could be your family, your friends, your neighbors, your community. I've got support group members in my support group that I facilitate who have really come together to be that informal support for one another. It could also be formal supports like programs, respite care, church organizations or groups that you are involved in who also step in to support you during the caregiving. And so really determining what are who are the people, who are the support networks, who are the organizations that I bring into my entire care circle to help me with this role. And that's structural. It helps you to then plan for care, plan for respite, plan ongoing how you're going to really navigate the disease and care for your loved one.
Mm. I think that can be so helpful to think about it in those two buckets of the informal and the formal support. And I think too, sometimes if we just get caregivers thinking about who in their lives could be part of their care circle, that can be helpful because they might not even have considered reaching out maybe to their faith community or looking into programs because so many caregivers say like, I didn't know what support was available. So just
Mm,
learning about the different programs and sometimes there's applications that need to be filled out or, processes you have to go through to get those formal supports. And so sometimes, it might not be that immediate like start of formal care or support, but you might need
mhm.
to learn about it first so then you can start to work towards building that in to the care as well. So just I like that you talk about it in those two buckets. I think that's really helpful for families.
Absolutely. And like you said, sometimes those those supports and organizations that you do have to reach out to kind of bring into the fold, it can feel a little bit overwhelming to do that. It can
Mhm.
feel like, oh, this is another system that I have to apply to or another system that I have to navigate. And there's red tape and there's barriers. And that's very real for a lot of caregivers. Um, but I always encourage caregivers to tap into your resources. Who are the local professionals who are aware of these systems, who know how to navigate these systems, and can help you get in and know how to fill out those applications, or maybe they can assist you with filling out those applications. We talk a lot about that in the support groups that I facilitate, and even the support group members come together and say, oh, I did that. I can help you with that. Don't worry. That's easy, right? And so that's why I love support groups. I could talk about those all day as well. But really, again, that's why we want to have these different support networks that we can tap into who can educate us and help us and support us along the way when we do come up against these systems that might be challenging to navigate. We have some support that can help us through that.
Mhm. I think there's just to your point about support groups, such power in connecting with other caregivers to realize, okay, other people have walked this journey. I can learn from them, or I can kind of get their tips and tricks that have worked or not worked. And you're so right. The beauty of support groups. Is so evident if you pop into one or if you lead one. So if you haven't already and you're listening, looked into support groups, I would definitely say please do because they can be so uplifting, in the sense that you realize you're not alone in this, because
Mhm.
caregiving can feel so isolating at times. So Ashley, you talked about kind of building that structural support system, formal and informal, but then earlier you mentioned boundaries. So I'm curious as to um, that part of the caregiving journey and how that can also kind of be maybe a form of caring for yourself or just kind of, I wouldn't say like taking control of the caregiving situation, but how does that kind of factor in setting up those boundaries?
Yes, I love talking about boundaries. My friends call me the boundary queen because I practice it in my own life too,
That's
right?
great.
I think, yes, I just think boundaries are so critical. And it's also, it's in our social work practice. We talk and
Mm,
study boundaries heavily. And so, first, let's define what a boundary is. A boundary is a limit that basically protects you and your well being right? So it's that line in the sand that really helps you to protect your time, your energy, your emotional capacity, and be able to do your caregiving fully. And so when we look at that in the space of caregiving, sometimes caregivers think that boundaries or saying no is just all about rejection. And it's not.
Mm.
It's not that. It's protection. I really
Ooh, I
do
like that.
believe that boundaries are protection. Um, and it goes back to what we were just saying. It's structure. It helps the caregiver to be able to clarify what roles are in play here. So this is going to be my role. This is going to be your role. This is what the need is for our loved one. And this is the part that you play in that. So it really safeguards our loved one as well that we're caring for. So for example, as a caregiver, you might say, I can manage the medical appointments, but I can't handle the finances. I can't manage the finances
Mm.
because that's not a skill set of mine. And then maybe the other caregiver says, well, I can handle the finances because I'm good with numbers. I've always, been in charge of that for mom. I can take that on. And then another family member says, I can be the primary hands-on caregiver. And if I'm going to do that, then I need a weekend each month where you guys step in and relieve me because that's going to be more physically taxing. And so that boundary is there for that caregiver to say, I can handle this and this is going to be my role. This is what we structured. This is my role. But the boundary then comes in and saying, I also need this in order to make sure I protect myself because if I'm the primary caregiver, I'm going to eventually run on empty doing all of this physical labor.
Mm.
So again, it's that structure. Boundaries help to create that structure, and it's that framework of protection. I really do believe.
I really like framing that up in terms of protection because I think sometimes caregivers see boundary setting as maybe selfish or they feel guilty. And so I do really appreciate that you frame it up in that way. It's actually protecting you. It's communicating what you are and are not comfortable with. Because I think
Mm-hmm.
sometimes in families, caregiving scenarios, communication is the breakdown where if there's not good communication and clear boundaries set, that's when things start to crumble and fall apart. I'm
Right.
sure you have a million examples of how that has showed up in families. So, establishing those boundaries, you're not being selfish. You are actually probably helping everybody in the caregiving scenario
Right.
recognize what their role is, how they can contribute. Because we also hear so often people say, well, how can I help? Let me know how I can support
Mm,
you. And that sometimes can feel overwhelming for the caregiver because they're like, gosh, that's one more thing I have to do. Delegate to you
figure it
what
out.
you can help me with. So if you can set some of those boundaries or assign those roles and duties, that can be so helpful along the
Yes.
caregiving journey.
Absolutely. And I believe that caregivers can have these conversations, they can communicate these boundaries early, right? I mean, if we're talking about in the beginning, you're identifying who are my people and developing that support network. When you sit down and have that conversation about here's the diagnosis, here's what's coming up, here's what we need to deal with. Right then and there, you can set roles and expectations and boundaries together. It doesn't have to be like, this is my boundary and no, I'm not gonna. It doesn't have to be aggressive. It doesn't have to be resistive. It can be collaborative where together you come up with the boundaries are so that you protect each other. That's really the idea, is that you're working collaboratively to protect your loved one and to protect each other.
Mm, I like that a lot. The proactive. I'm sure you would agree, Ashley, like, it would be so ideal if every family was proactive, and set those boundaries and expectations up front, but so often we meet families, like, in crisis mode, when something major has happened and, their emotions are running really high, and so in those moments, it can be really challenging to establish
Mhm.
those boundaries, or once you're kind of too far into it, um, I would imagine sometimes that creates challenges. Do you have any thoughts or insights on maybe families in those situations?
Yes. And sometimes, just like you said, some family members they're in denial. They're not
Mm.
ready to accept the diagnosis. They're not ready to bear witness to their loved one changing. It's complicated. The disease process is complicated for all those who are involved in the care. So some family members aren't ready to accept that, and that can then create some resistance or resentment. That can create some resentment for the other caregiver who is the chosen one or is the one who is taking on all of the care. And so for those caregivers, I think it's okay to set your boundary and to say, that's not good enough. And I have to continue on with the care for our loved one. And so putting that boundary between that other person or that other sibling and your loved one and saying, hey, it doesn't feel safe. It's not a good option for you to be involved. I'm going to take this on. And I've worked with a lot of family caregivers who have said they can't even have that family member or that sibling involved or seeing their loved one anymore because
Mm.
of the strain that it's put on the family dynamics and because of the denial that the other party has really taken hold of. So it's okay too if sometimes those relationships aren't able to stay together and you're not able to um, involve them in the care if it's not safe for you or your loved one.
Mm. That's a great point that you just made, Ashley. And family dynamics, they're hard. Every family is different. Everyone's coming to the situation from their perspective. Everyone's maybe in a different place, as you mentioned, with like acceptance versus denial.
Hmm.
Um, and we do often see kind of one person that does step up within the family that takes on the majority of the care as kind of that primary caregiver. And one of, I think, the most powerful Instagram posts that you have done, actually, there's two. There's kind of one from that perspective of the sibling that stepped up and maybe some of the emotions that come along with that, maybe the resentment or the feelings of isolation and loneliness. And then you have another post from the perspective of the sibling that didn't step up and they're explaining why. And as we were preparing for this, you were like, go read the comments because they're so interesting. And so I did that. And people really get emotional about this topic. They either really resonate
Hmm.
or they have, some hurt from their personal family caregiving experience. So do you want to maybe just speak to those two posts and maybe what inspired you to write them? I think what you do so beautifully on your Instagram page is you speak from the perspective of the caregiver and say a lot of things that people are thinking, but are maybe too afraid to say for themselves.
Yeah. I credit my social work background with that for sure. Being able to, ask the tough questions and do a little probing and at the end bring us together to common ground. That's really why we
Hmm.
do that. But honestly, I think I was noticing because I've been on social media for years, posting content and posting educational resources and raising awareness and talking about boundaries and sibling dynamics and complications and breakdown in communication. I've been talking about those things. But I think the shift more recently over the past several months is the style and the way in which I am talking about these topics now. And I like to call it voice first education because what
Mm.
I'm doing is centering the voice and the perspective of the caregiver and the person who is experiencing that shift in the family dynamic or that stressor related to caregiving. Um, and so what I do know is that caregivers do not want just a long laundry list of things to do, and they don't want to hear advice all the time. They don't
Mm.
need that. They want to be seen and heard, and they want to feel like somebody gets it. That is my experience. Wow, she gets it. And so that's
Mm.
really what prompted me to shift the way in which I talk about these same topics, but really, again, that voice first education, centering the voice of the caregiver. And centering the entire family dynamic. So like you said, there's 2 posts. The first post is the perspective of the caregiver who is in the thick of it. They might even call themselves the chosen one, the one who has been chosen to take on this insurmountable amount of work and caregiving by themselves with limited supports and resources available. And then the second post is the post from the sibling, the one who didn't step up, the one who ghosted you, the one who said, let me know if you need anything, but didn't put any action behind that phrase, right? And so I think both perspectives are important because the majority of folks who are in my community, they are the caregiver who has taken all of it on. And they are at their wits. They're doing it all by themselves, and they are really looking for that community and that support. And then there's that other perspective, the caregiver who did step back and didn't show up at all. And like I said, when you look at those comments, you can see the hurt. You can actually feel it, right? Some of those comments that I read, I read them all. I don't take it lightly that they invite me into their world where they are caregiving. What an honor, where they feel safe to share that on that platform that, you know what, I don't agree with this perspective. I don't think that my sibling would apologize. I don't want to hear that. I call BS. Those are some of the comments, and that's stemming from hurt. That's stemming from pain and their reality. And so what I want to offer them is that you're right. I see that and I hear that and what you've experienced. And that's what a lot of folks in this community have experienced as well. But what I also want to offer you is that it's okay to receive that apology that you wish that you received. Maybe they didn't say it, but you still deserve it. And I'm going to give you that apology in this content, in this context of this post. I'm going to say the words that maybe they should have said. And also, this comes from years of my own family experience, but also working with family caregivers who have shared these things. I wish my loved one would say this. I wish I heard these words from my sibling, right? So even though it's not a specific individual that I'm talking about in these posts, it's the experience of multiple caregivers, multiple stories that I've heard, my own experience that have come together in that single post, and that is saying the words of that caregiver.
Wow. Gosh.
That was a
I feel
lot.
like we just need to take a moment to soak that in, because, gosh, that is, just to allow somebody to feel seen and heard, and it is so powerful. And I just thank you for bringing that community to caregivers, bringing that safe space to be vulnerable and to share, because caregiving is so personal. It's such an emotional journey. It's, often you're caring for a family member, someone very close to you. You're watching them change, and then you're taking on this really heavy, a lot of times burdensome load of hands-on care and emotional care as well. And so just to have somebody say to you, I see you, I hear you, I recognize the hard work you're putting in, that it's powerful. I have no other words than that, because it really is. And you can see just how people are drawn to your Instagram page, The Dementia Guru, which of course we link to in the show notes, so you can go follow Ashley. But it really just is resonating. And I think, as more people start to identify themselves as caregivers, which we know can be a struggle for some folks to say, yes, I am a caregiver. They just think I'm being an adult daughter or a spouse, and that's just kind of my family role. But as they identify as a caregiver, then they're able to connect with people like you, Ashley, or their local supports, and find that community, those informal kind of structural supports for them. And I think that is so, so important. And so kind of as we segue through our conversation, I would really love to circle back to some of those more like real resources that you're seeing help family caregivers day in and day out, because I think that's what people are very hungry for is, okay, how do I get help so that if I am the only one, I get that respite or time away, because we know that's so vital for people to continue on their caregiving journey. Because as we talked about, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So we need to take those breaks along the way. So I know you lead the Family Caregiver Support Program locally in your community. So maybe if you want to share a little bit about that or some other programs that maybe are more nationwide that people can tap into, that would be super helpful.
Yes, absolutely. And I feel like one of the biggest mistakes I see caregivers make is waiting until a crisis to look for help, right?
Yep.
And I hope from our conversation today, something that we've said encourages you to not wait until you have to have these really tough conversations with your siblings or with your families, or a crisis has happened, where you will actually be proactive and look into some of these resources that I'm going to mention. Don't wait until it's too late and you're scrambling trying to put things together. The Family Caregiver Support Program, that program is everywhere. It should be right in your own backyard. So reach out to your local area agency on aging. That's the best place to start. You can just Google that. Where is my local area agency on aging? And that is the number you're going to want to call. And when you call them, you want to say, I'm a caregiver. I'm interested in learning about your family caregiver support program. That program provides respite, short-term respite. It provides support groups. It provides education. And this is not just dementia specific. It's for older adults and caregivers who are caring for older adults or disabled adults. So it is definitely a resource that you want to tap into. Here locally within my state in North Carolina, we also have a wonderful program called Project CARE. And get ready for this. The CARE acronym stands for Caregiver Alternatives to Running on Empty.
Ooh, I like that.
I just love that because as a caregiver, do you ever feel like you're running on empty? Like you're just running this race and you just cannot see the finish line? That is literally what a caregiver explained it as. I'm just running this race and it just feels like I cannot ever see the finish line. And so what our program does is we provide that break. We provide that respite so that that caregiver who is running that race can pull over to the side, take a drink of water, take a deep breath, and then get back into that race and keep going. So we like to think of ourselves as that drink of water, that bottle of water. Respite is that deep breath or that break, that drink of water that you take so that you can feel restored and you can feel more equipped to get back into that race and keep running it. And so that is basically what respite is. It's short term. We provide funding so that caregivers can take that break. And the part that I love about the program is that it's not just the respite, because sometimes it's hard to take a break. It's hard to give yourself permission to take a break. And so as licensed social workers in this program, we are also counseling with caregivers to help them understand the value of respite and giving yourself permission to take a break. And then once you do, how to maximize that time, how to maximize your respite time. So whenever you do take that break, you're not on 10 and nervous the whole time, but you are actually feeling relaxed. You're feeling restored. You're feeling better equipped to get back into your caregiving role whenever it is time. And so that's why I love the program, because it's twofold. It's the care management and the coaching, the counseling, the disease education. And then the icing on the cake is the respite, where you actually get to take that break. And so that program again is in North Carolina, but I do believe there are other programs statewide that offer that as well. And so you can search, again, go to Google, search what dementia specific respite programs are local to me, because there might be something in your state or your community that's available. And then there's also the GUIDE program. I'm
Yes.
sure, Lakeley, you're very familiar with that. It's a newer program, but it's wonderful. And it really allows for caregivers, again, to take that respite. We talk about respite so much and how important it is. And I know, too, I have to say this, too. I know that there are sometimes barriers to being able to take respite or to access respite and not feeling like you can take that break. And so these programs that I am mentioning, they are really there to help you cut through some of that so that you can access these programs and be able to take that break. So the GUIDE program, they provide care navigation, 24 access to a support line, and then also in-home care, in-home respite care. And I believe that goes up to about $2,500 annually. And so that's great. It may not feel like a whole lot, but it is something. And it does allow you to plan for a respite.
Mm.
And so if you have a vacation that's coming up, or you have really important doctor's appointments that you need to schedule because you've put yourself on the back burner and you haven't planned that out, maybe you can be intentional and plan the respite, the $2,500, with in line with that event that is coming up. So it allows you to think ahead and plan your respite. And in our program, we talk about how important that is, not to just say, oh, I'll take a break down the road when I get some time. No, no, no. We want you to actually plan it. We want you to be intentional, because then it's something that you can look forward to as well. And it kind of gets you through caregiving also.
Thank you so much for explaining respite, because I think a lot of people don't know what that term means. And so really it's just taking a break. And it can look, different for everyone. And as you mentioned, those, resources are awesome. I think you and I both are also connected to Hilarity for Charity, which has a grant program as well that people can apply for. So there are respite resources out there, but again, you have to search for it. They're probably not going to land on your doorstep. You do have to get on Google, do some searching, or in your support group, ask, okay, who have you used? I know at Home Instead, our services are a form of respite as well, kind of more of a formal respite, but even just, having a family member or friend or neighbor come over regularly to give you that break so that you can go to your doctor's appointment, or maybe it's your monthly book club or your faith community service, whatever's going to fill your bucket, plugging those in during those respite moments is so helpful. And I love that you say plan it out, because, often I hear caregivers say, well, things aren't bad enough yet, so I'm just going to wait until they get worse. And I'm always like, well, what's
Till
worse?
the crisis happens.
Yeah, what's worse? Like, oh, let's try to be proactive. So I echo your comment earlier. If there's one thing people are taking away from today, just do a little planning ahead. Think about, opportunities to create those support networks to take that respite, because it really will help sustain you along your caregiving journey. It's really not it's not selfish. It's more of like survival. It's going to help you survive this journey.
And I always encourage caregivers, if that feels like it's too much or it's too overwhelming, reach out to support. Reach out to people like me who are social workers. That's what we do. Gerontological social workers. We come together to help you with a care plan. I know there's aging life care managers. There's therapists and counselors who do this work, where you can sit down with somebody who can help you make sense of what all of this is and connect you to the resources. And you don't have to navigate everything and put everything together, because you're already doing that for your loved one. So get with a social worker, get with someone, a professional who's able to help you make sense of this and put it together so that you know what is available to you and you can proactively tap into it, because we get it. We know that you're focused, you're laser focused on caregiving, and that laser focus is important, but we don't want you to look up and before you know it, you're in the hospital. Because you didn't take that break. You didn't take a moment to take that deep breath, right? We don't want you to wait till it's too late.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Gosh, well, we've covered a lot of great information, Ashley, and I just really value your insights, and you just have such a valuable perspective. Your lived experience plus your gerontological background and your social work background, and just so grateful that we could spend time together today. And would love for people to follow you on Instagram so that they can connect and continue to learn from you. And so will you just tell folks how they can continue to connect with you and find all of your great information and resources?
Yes. So my social media handles, including Instagram, is at the Dementia Guru. And I am on there supporting, advocating, raising awareness, and centering dignity. So please join me in that. You are welcome. It is a safe space for you. Tell a friend. My website is www.thedementiaguru.com. So a wonderful resource. There's freebies on there. I have a monthly newsletter that you can subscribe to, where I also talk about these issues and provide resources. And I also work with businesses that are ready to make a change and to support caregivers. You can also work with me too. And so go to that website, fill out my work with me form, and let's begin to build together.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that. And we have linked to it all in the show notes so that folks can follow you. And as we wrap up our time together today, Ashley, what do you hope caregivers take away? I know we've kind of talked about that already, but if you could just kind of sum it up in a couple sentences, what would you like caregivers to know?
Ooh, so much.
I know it's hard to limit you to one or two sentences.
It is.
Sorry.
Because I could just go on. No, that's okay. I would want caregivers to take away that they are not alone in this. And I know everybody says that, but I really mean it. It may feel like you are alone and that your family, your siblings, your friends have disappeared, but there is a network of hundreds, thousands, millions of caregivers who also are in that same feeling. And so you're not alone in this. We are here supporting you. Connect with us and know that you're not alone in this.
I love that. Well, thank you again, Ashley, for joining us, for helping to share some great information and resources that hopefully will make caregivers feel less alone after listening to our discussion today. So thank you so much. I would love to have you back on again sometime soon. So I hope we make that happen.
Awesome. And thank you so much for the work you do and for inviting me. I love talking. I know we've said before we could go on and on. So
I know.
I'm open to coming back.
We'll dream up another fantastic topic and have you back for sure. But thank you again so much. And I can't wait for next time. Ashley, thank you for your honesty, your advocacy, and the tangible tools you have shared today. If you're one of those caregivers who are feeling overwhelmed, start by reaching out to your local area agency on aging. Ask about respite for caregivers and know that community exists. And if today's episode resonated with you, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with another caregiver who may need it. You can always reach me at caregiverchats@homeinsteadinc.com. You can also follow us on social media at Home Instead Inc. for updates and caregiving tips. Thanks for listening, and please remember to take good care of yourself while you care for others. Caregiver Chats is brought to you by Home Instead, If you're looking for in-home care to support you on your caregiving journey, please visit homeinstead.com to learn more.